Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Mohammed Ali Lutfi. I am representing the stakeholder group of persons with disabilities, Disabled Peoples International, and the Global Initiative for Inclusive Information Communication Technologies. I am your moderator today. I'll begin with a few housekeeping items. This event will be recorded and shared later. International Sign Language interpretation and live captioning are provided. The International Sign interpreter is spotlighted, and the captioning is available by clicking on the closed captioning box on the bottom of your screen, and also available in a separate link that has been shared in the chat box. Presenters and the moderator will use their cameras while presenting, but for others, we ask you that you please turn off your cameras. We will be sharing relevant links in the chat box throughout the event. Throughout the event, please ask questions by writing in the chat box on the bottom of the page. If we are unable to answer your question for any reason, please email us and we will make sure to follow up with you afterwards. The email will be posted in the chat box. Now on to the event. For persons with disabilities, for us, data are important to understand who is being affected, where, and why. To understand the specific barriers we encounter and what policies and programs are needed to mitigate those barriers to include all of us into society equally to others. There are many data gaps for persons with disabilities, some of which are that disability data can be insufficient, inconsistent, biased, and unreliable. Enumerators often are not trained, and thus relevant data are less likely to be collected. Data gained or produced by organizations of persons with disabilities and NGOs are usually not recognized by statistical authorities. Often there is a lack of cooperation between statistical offices and organizations of persons with disabilities and NGOs on exchange of statistical information and other data. It is difficult to find reliable sources and sort of data with disaggregated levels that can be used in proposals, projects, and programs. And persons with disabilities and their representative organizations often are excluded from data collection processes. To address these gaps and others, organizations of persons with disabilities must play a meaningful role in data collection, analysis, and use. There is no excuse not to have data on persons with disabilities or to include organizations of persons with disabilities in data collection and interpretation efforts. Persons with disabilities and their representative organizations are the expert on issues affecting them and are generating community-driven data that can complement official statistics. Now I'll turn to our distinguished panel, who will highlight disability data needs and examples of data advocacy efforts among various stakeholders. Our panelists include perspectives from organizations of persons with disabilities, NGOs, the United Nations, academia, and statisticians. Our first panelist is Dr. Elizabeth Lockwood, representative of CBM Global Disability Inclusion at the United Nations. She will highlight disability data advocacy efforts at the regional level, including outcomes of lessons learned from data project with UNFPA in Asia and Pacific. Dr. Lockwood, the floor is yours, 10 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mohammed, and thank you very much to Fordham University. It's very nice to be co-organizing this event with you today. And I'd also like to thank my distinguished co-panelists. It's a pleasure to be presenting with you. I am building on what Mohammed just wonderfully spoke about, that OPDs, persons with disabilities, and their representative organizations, OPDs, must always be part of the data process, and especially lead this process if and where relevant, especially. Data on the experiences of persons with disabilities are important to understand who is being affected, where and why, and to understand these specific barriers for full inclusion. We are also looking at capacity building of all actors in the data process. So this is enumerators and national statistical offices, but also OPDs. And that's what my presentation focuses on today. As a consequence, the stakeholder group of persons with disabilities, the International Disability Alliance, and CBM Global Disability Inclusion developed a disability data advocacy toolkit specifically for OPDs. The toolkit focuses on how to advocate for better data and how to use data for advocacy. We're very pleased that it's available in various languages and also in easy read and international sign. And I will send a link to the chat box when I'm done with this. Emerging from the toolkit, we are lucky enough to have just finished a partnership with UNFPA Asia Pacific and CBM Global. And this was in close collaboration with the stakeholder group, again, International Disability Alliance and national and regional OPDs of the region, including Pacific Disability Forum and ASEAN Disability Forum. And now I will talk about that project. The project was, the overarching goal was to establish a partnership and build capacity to increase the quality of disability data in the Asia Pacific region. We produced 3 outcomes: a regional report on the status of disability data, pilot disability data advocacy trainings for OPDs, and publicly available resources that were launched yesterday. It's very good timing. I will share a link of all of that as well after I'm done. Last year, the second half of last year, a mapping was carried out on the national collection of disability data from censuses and large household surveys in the region. This was comprised of 36 countries, and it was done through the UNFPA Asia Pacific country offices. OPDs were also consulted, and they shared their experiences around disability data in the region to complement the findings. Information was gathered from relevant sources such as national statistical offices and government focal points responsible for monitoring the INCHIAN strategy indicators and the corresponding sustainable development goal indicators. And 20 of those 36 countries were represented in our responses. Some key findings from these responses was that we found the level of knowledge and ease of collecting disability data varied quite a bit across these different countries, which is probably not that surprising. 1 in 4 of the respondent countries in this group could monitor critical disability inclusion indicators in relation to healthcare access, and only 1 in 5 in the region of this group were using internationally recommended methods to identify persons with disabilities in their national data systems. 1 in 4 were able to systematically identify and report barriers and enablers for access to education for learners with disabilities. And most of these countries that responded have significant gaps in their overall technical capacity to produce critical development indicators on persons with disabilities. And although many of these countries can disaggregate the indicators they produce, few are using questions framed around functioning to identify this population. For example, using the Washington Group questions, which we'll hear about more later. And this really raises questions on the quality, usefulness, and comparability of the data. And my last point here is that many persons with disabilities are concerned about inadequate data around persons with disabilities in the region, but do not consider that they have enough knowledge to confidently use or advocate for better data. So this is a good area for us to focus on going forward. Another part of the project, we had 2 pilot disability data advocacy workshops for OPDs. They were both carried out in November in 2021. The workshop includes 8 modules. It's quite interactive, and it focuses on the capacity building of OPDs to understand and use data and how to advocate for data at the national level in their context. The workshops were carried out in person in Samoa with 15 participants and online in Nepal with 28 participants. Both workshops were facilitated by local OPD representatives who were also data experts. And then further desk-based user testing was undertaken. And some key feedback points that I'll share from both the training and user test feedback is that we found, where participants told us, it was particularly helpful to link the training materials to local languages and contexts, especially to understand where local data comes from and how to access that local data. It was beneficial to focus on all data processes, including data use, collection, and analysis. There was a need to strengthen internal data collection mechanisms for OPDs to address participation barriers and reach the most marginalized groups within OPDs. People said that the in-person training was more effective than online, which doesn't surprise me at all, and I'm sure none of you. And also a community of practice as a resource was suggested to develop common concerns, assist with understanding disability data, to interpret data tools such as the Washington Group questions. And as a next step, it would be very important to provide an advanced training to analyze and use data and advocacy for some of these OPDs. We will have further feedback from OPDs on this pilot training, and then we'll revise it and we will share it publicly later this year. So we will come back and share that with everybody soon. So keep a lookout for it. And building from feedback from the workshops from OPDs, we produced 2 practical resources, which will be linked in the link I send. The first one is a guidance to help OPDs understand the current status of their national disability data and how it relates to advocacy objectives. And the second is a brief overview of the Washington Group questions to help with advocacy messages and knowledge around current data. So we hope these will be used. They're open source. And overall, the findings from this project reinforce once again that data are essential for government officials and policymakers to fulfill the rights of persons with disabilities. And again, reiterating what Mohammed said, for this to happen, OPDs must fully participate in all data processes. And we hope to continue to build on this wonderful partnership with UNFPA Asia Pacific and to foster other partnerships, investment, and capacity building of disability data in the Asia Pacific region and elsewhere. And thank you very much. And back to you, Mohammed.
Yeah, currently unmuted.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. You have addressed excellent points on that highlight that disability data are essential for government officials and policymakers to fulfill the rights of persons with disabilities, and it is imperative to involve persons with disabilities and their representative organizations to fully participate in all data processes. Thank you very much. Our next presenter is Mr. Eric Ngondi, United Disability Persons of Kenya, a board member representing youth, who will share examples of data advocacy efforts at the national level, specifically from UDPK in Kenya. Eric, 10 minutes, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Currently unmuted.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this opportunity to the United Disabled Persons of Kenya to share with you some of the data systems that are inclusive for persons with disability here in Kenya in the recent past. My name is Eric Ngondi. As you said, I'm a member of the board of the United Disabled Persons of Kenya. I represent the youth. I'm going to share with you some how persons with disability were involved and got the Washington group set of questions in our national census that happened in 2019, how persons with disabilities were involved. And I'm going to additionally share with you some efforts that are currently ongoing on or we have been involved in order to show inclusive data systems at the national level in Kenya. So I mentioned first our our census of 2019. So the Kenya Population and Housing Census was carried out in August 2019. And for a long time, a long period of time, persons with disabilities have longed to have a data that is inclusive, data that is quality, data that is timely. And we saw this as an opportunity. Having taken time to have the Washington set group of questions incorporated in the census, we saw this as an opportunity, and as a disability movement, we looked forward to having disability data. Yeah. So what did we do then? First, there was a training of enumerators of the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, intense training so that they could understand what the Washington set group of questions module was and why it is important for us persons with disability to have it there. Then most importantly, there was engagement of persons with disabilities and their representative organizations. UDPK trained and carried out sensitizations of persons with disabilities and their organizations. So from what did we get then from the census data? So from the census data, which was carried for population over 5-year-olds, we did obtain the number of persons with disability by disability and also the persons themselves. So moving forward, so there's going to be publication then of a monogram that will show distribution of persons with disability by either the gender, the education, and other socioeconomic factors. As a disability movement also, we've been looking forward to having a survey of persons with disability because we believe this will provide more accurate data for persons with disability, and thereby be able to use this data in policy and decision making. So the second intervention I could talk about is partnership for research. And so where we did have no data, we used our partners or we did some research and also got community-driven data in order to inform policy formulation and decision-making. We've worked with our networks and alliances in order to obtain this data. So some of the example I could give is that we worked with the Leonard Chacha in the Inclusion in Eye to Eye project, and also the International Development Studies led by Sight Savers International in order to obtain the challenges and the impact of COVID to persons with disabilities. We have also looked forward to obtaining data from OPDs on the ground at the grassroots level, whereby the information from the OPDs has informed what services, whether they are available or not available on the ground as provided by government and other institutions. We have also worked with the OPDs also on the ground to collect data. To what extent then have persons with disabilities been involved in government initiatives such as cash transfer or persons with disabilities registration? So this data then is used to identify gaps and is used to inform and work collaboratively with the government institution and county governments and also other stakeholders and partners in order to inform policy formulation and also decision making. So we have recently also collaborated with the Voluntary Service Overseas and the SDG Forum in Kenya in order to know the implementation of SDGs and how persons with disabilities are involved. And in light of this, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics has called for an inventory of the CSOs and other non-state actors that are involved in citizen-generated data in order to develop a quality criteria for CGD data. So we note that also we used simple data collection methods such as WhatsApp, text messaging platforms, as well as webinars and surveys in order to get some of this data that is critical in some of our work. For example, some of this WhatsApp group led to focus groups whereby we got to know the impact of COVID to women and ladies during this pandemic. So let me also now discuss about another intervention, the Inclusive Data Charter. And we know that in GDS 2018, Kenya signed the IDC and thereby looked forward to implementing this. And so moving forward, the responsible ministry has developed action plan, including persons with disabilities and their OPDs. So the other intervention I want to talk about is skills development through Bridge CRPD SDG training by IDA. And this is paramount to mention because this has developed the capacity of leaders of OPDs in Kenya in order to advocate and ask and seek the required data in order to use it in different spaces. I want to, at this point now, to mention some of additional data gaps that we do have as as a disability movement, and say that first, the data from census. It has become a contentious issue currently. However, measures have been put in place. And the reason this has been so is because the anticipated number of persons with disability was not obtained. And the challenges could be well attributed to the census that was done was for over 5-year-olds, challenges with translating the questions, stigma that is attributed to persons having disabilities, and even challenges with enumerators. The next challenge I could talk about is funding for disability inclusion. Funding for disability inclusion.
Can you please
Pardon? Winding up, yes, please.
Yes, please.
So what the other challenges, of course, funding for inclusion. So while the Kenya government has made a lot of effort, to provide, to support disability activities, there's a lot that is required, such that data is required in how much is being disbursed in order to have disability data or activity on inclusion. Also, tracking down budgets, and as well as and also how the challenge with this, not having disaggregated data for persons with disability. And finally, I could mention that also absence of data in climate change matter as pertaining to persons with disabilities is actually another challenge. Thank you very much, Chair.
Are currently unmuted.
Thank you, Eric. You've raised excellent points regarding that the collaboration between organizations of persons with disabilities and the statistical commissions will ensure that gaps in disability data are addressed. Thank you very much. Our next distinguished panelist is Dr. Jennifer Maddens, a consultant on disability statistics for the Washington Group on Disability Statistics. She will discuss data needs and recent progress in data collection using the Washington Group questionnaire. Jennifer, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mohammed, and thank you for the organizers for including the Washington Group work in this webinar. My remarks will touch on progress in disability data collection, but I think I'm going to focus more on some of the significant data gaps that remain and some ideas about how we might close them. There is no doubt that a significant progress has been made in the development and implementation of some tested data collection tools. We have the set of tools that have been developed by the Washington Group, and that these have been adopted by national statistical offices, OPDs, development ministries, and NGOs. And the Washington Group members report that the short set has been used in some way in one of their censuses or surveys in over 100 countries. And we also have the UNICEF Washington Group Child Functioning Module, which has been included in the mix in 63 countries. Actually, there's a side event following this one that will report on that data collection. But significant gaps remain, and this has been mentioned by both Elizabeth and Eric. We do not have universal inclusion of standard data items to identify the population with disabilities in all relevant data collections, and therefore we don't have full harmonization of disability data collection within countries, much less across countries. And we cannot disaggregate all the relevant outcome indicators as required by the CRPD and SDGs, and this has come up multiple times during the summit. We have not sufficiently expanded beyond the data that are needed for disaggregation. Disaggregation is the beginning, but certainly not the end. And to this list, I want to add that we don't have accessible data collection methodologies, and more needs to be done in that area. Now, these gaps reflect the breadth and scope of disability data and really are not surprising. We tend to refer to disability data as if it were one entity, when in fact it encompasses a very wide range of topics. And when you think about it, since disability and functioning relate to all aspects of life, disability data collections also have to involve all aspects of life and have to be integrated into all data collections. So given these data collection challenges, there really is a need for an overarching strategy that will optimize the quality and usefulness of the resulting data. COVID-19 clearly illustrated the limitations of the data that we have and how this affected our ability to respond to the needs of persons with disabilities. However, we can use these lessons learned, they were learned the hard way, but they were learned in any case, to create a comprehensive and responsive disability data strategy. Now, given the complexity, it's a little bit easier to think about the different building blocks of disability data, one of which is content, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next few minutes. And that's just, what are we collecting information about? And as I said, we collected on a very wide range of topics. And then there's the analysis and dissemination of those data. Data disaggregation is front and center here, again, as we've heard throughout the summit. That is the way that we monitor whether there has been full inclusion, and over time we monitor changes in any disparities that exist. And then there are the variety of sources of data. There are the population-based data collections, and here I include censuses and surveys. And has been mentioned, there are many different actors that do surveys, not only national statistical offices, but many parts of government, many parts of civil society are all involved in doing censuses and surveys in one form or another. The other major data source are administrative and programmatic data collections that reflect programmatic activities in all sectors of government. And these can be general, something like the data that would be generated by an unemployment scheme, for example, or they can be disability specific, and they're major sources of data with their own challenges and advantages. But there are also some new sources of data, big data, crowdsourced data, geospatial data. All of these have to be pulled under a data strategy. And again, to this, I would add the accessibility of any of these data collection programs themselves. Now, first turning to content, the identification of the population with disabilities is a first and most critical step. But it's complicated, and it's complicated by the fact that there is no one population with disabilities, even though we refer to the population with disabilities all the time as if it was a singular entity. Functioning and disability exist on a continuum, and the first step has to be to collect data on the continuum. But the second step is to define the population using a cut point that reflects the data collection objectives. That is how those data are going to be used. Now, there is no doubt that this complicates the presentation of the data, but it's a complexity that data producers and users, all of us, need to become comfortable with and need to give more credence to. Now, another complication is that it's not possible to identify the population with disabilities using just one question. This has been asked over and over again and shown not to be possible. We have to ask multiple questions, and this will require the investment of additional resources. We also need to acknowledge that not all data collection platforms can accommodate the same number or kind of questions and get the same quality of data. Surveys can include many more questions than consensuses, and as Eric mentioned, a disability survey will give you much more and better data than a census can. But to maximize data utility and quality, we need to harmonize data collection across systems, which can be done through a data strategy. This also reduces confusion that arises when different definitions produce different results in different data collection. And this really is very complicated for politicians. They have a hard time understanding this, and we need to make how these data relate to each other much clearer. Now, harmonization also requires that a core data set be included in all relevant data systems. And since disability affects all aspects of life, it needs to almost be included in every data system. Most critical is harmonizing the way the population is defined, or the populations are defined. Again, applying to population-based and administrative systems. So for example, in education management information systems, these are being modified to include the child functioning module that are used in surveys. This allows for the identification of learners with disabilities. It allows for data disaggregation, and crosswalking across data systems. Now, the questions used to identify the population with disabilities across data systems should also be subsets of each other. So, for example, if the short set is used in the census, but the Washington Group extended set in a survey, you can crosswalk between those two data systems. Oops. Now, once you've identified the population with disability, you can estimate any kind of prevalence rate. And you can do this for an overall disability indicator or for specific domains of functioning or combinations of domains. You can also look at the severity of difficulties. And all of this can be done for population subgroups defined by age, gender, geographic location, migration status, a range of characteristics of the population. And this is the multi-sectorial approach that's extremely important. It is also then possible to disaggregate data and compare characteristics of the population with disabilities to the population without, on the full range of inclusion indicators on employment, education, poverty, civic engagement. Again, key to monitoring the CRPD and the SDGs. But we need to go beyond identification of disaggregation. Once disparities have been identified, it's necessary to determine the cause. And this involves identifying barriers and facilitators to full inclusion, as is done by the Washington Group ILO Labor Force Survey and the Washington UNICEF Inclusive Education Module, which is under development. But all this needs to be done in many more sectors. And additional information is also needed on other aspects of functional difficulties, such as age at onset, cause, and the need and use of services and assistive devices. Now, turning again to accessible data collection methodology, many methodologies in use today are inaccessible to persons with disabilities, which not only adversely affects data quality, especially the representativeness of the data, but also does not respect the rights of persons with disabilities. Accessible methods need to be developed and implemented so that persons with disabilities are included in the data collection itself, not only in developing the data collections, but also acting as the respondents. This applies to all data collections, whether or not they obtain information on disability. I think it's critically important to remember that when we talk about disability data, we're not only talking about data about disability, we're talking about how disability interacts with all aspects of life. Since adopting accessible methods applies to all modes of data collection, and whether they are in person or on paper or phone or web, but all these modes have different requirements, and so different approaches to accessibility will be needed. So, thinking about the way forward, the tools we have tools available to identify the population with disabilities and therefore to monitor full inclusion. And these need to be included on all ongoing core data systems, whether population-based or administrative, whether done by a national statistical office or another government agency or an NGO or an OPD. And they also need to be added to any new collections. For example, those that were started in response to COVID, many of them did not include the information needed to identify the population. Additional information on barriers and facilitators, service need and use, cause, age of onset, all need to be collected using a comprehensive strategy. And again, all data methods need to be made accessible. Thank you very much for allowing me to present.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you very much. You've raised excellent points on how questions that identify the population with disabilities, such as the Washington Group question set, must be added to all core data collections. And the data collection process needs to be more accessible to persons with the disabilities and their representative organizations. Thank you very much. Before we move to the next distinguished panelist, I would like to remind all of our audience and participants here to post their questions and answers on the Q&A box that is located in the bottom of your screen. All right, last but not least, our final panelist today is Dr. Sufi Metra, Fordham University professor and principal investigator of the Disability Data Initiative, who will tell us about key findings from the Disability Data Initiative. Dr. Metra, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I just want to note that there might be a technical issue with the Q&A box. I don't know if anyone tried to type a question. We are trying to fix it. So please try to type your question, or maybe keep your question for later when hopefully this will be working. So thank you all so much for being here, and particular thank you to CBM Global for partnering with the Fordham Research Consortium on Disability to organize this event. So we have heard about data gaps earlier and about how to fill these data gaps. So I will continue talking about how to fill data gaps. So we need data produced by various stakeholders. This was noted earlier, and in particular by organizations of persons with disabilities. So such data will go a long way in understanding the situation of people with disabilities, documenting the situation and informing policy and advocacy efforts. At the same time, such efforts do not provide nationally representative information on individuals and households, and such information may be difficult to compare across countries. It may also not be recognized by statistical authorities, as Mohammed noted earlier. So that's where national statistics based on household surveys and censuses can be useful. They can provide estimates for indicators that document whether equal rights have been respected. Statistics, of course, need to be based on concepts that are in line with the human rights approach to disability. They need to be disaggregated by disability status and reflect various aspects of the lives of persons with disabilities and of their diversity. So the Disability Data Initiative and its first report that was launched last June provides an analysis of the questions on disability in national censuses and household surveys globally. And it also takes advantage of the increasing availability of internationally comparable disability questions by analyzing data from censuses or surveys, national censuses or surveys for 41 countries. It produces about 30 indicators disaggregated across disability status. So results are available in a report and in tables and country briefs on a website. I'm going to include the website on in the chat box. If I can copy and paste it. So the link now is in the chat box, and I'm going to read it out loud. It's https://disabilitydata.ace.fordham. I spell it out, FORDHAM.edu/. So I'll summarize a couple of key findings from the report, and I'll start with the review of data sets worldwide. So that will overlap to some extent in some of the work that Elizabeth presented earlier for a particular region, or that Jennifer presented for Washington Group short set of questions. So we reviewed questionnaires of censuses and national surveys for countries around the world. And we found, and we analyzed the types of disability questions that were asked. First, we find that, and when I say we, it's a big team of students at Fordham University that I'm grateful to work with. We found that disability questions of any kind are absent for 1 in 4 countries and for 65% of household surveys and censuses that were under review. So that means that in many countries, surveys and censuses, persons with disabilities are invisible in national statistics, because there is no question whatsoever in their key data collection tools. At the same time, and this is quite encouraging, we find that disability questions that meet international standards of comparability have been increasingly adopted. So what do these standards of comparability refer to? We use the recommendations of the United Nations Principles and Recommendations for Population and Housing Censuses of 2017, according to which there needs to be questions about functional difficulties in at least 4 core domains. So seeing, hearing, walking, cognition. And there may also be questions on 2 other domains, self-care and communication. So these questions may follow the exact recommendation of the Washington Group for its short set of questions. So we find that fewer than half of countries and only 16% of the surveys and censuses under review have internationally comparable functional difficulty questions. So for many countries, national surveys and censuses do not provide the data that is necessary to monitor the Sustainable Development Goals or for persons with disabilities, or to implement Article 31 of the CRPD that requires state bodies to collect information, including statistical information, to inform policies. So now moving on to the results of the analysis of survey and census data for 41 countries. So these countries were chosen based on availability, accessibility of the national data sets and their inclusion of functional disability questions in at least 4 domains. So we disaggregate indicators by functional disability status and for functional difficulty status, and then also by sex, rural, urban residents, and age groups. So in other words, we compare indicators for women with and without disabilities, men with and without disabilities, and so on. So we have results tables on the website that have the detailed results. So what do we find? The results are not going to surprise many of the Global Disability Summit attendees. So just 2 key findings I'll highlight. First, functional difficulties are not rare. We find the median rate of prevalence is 13% among adults in the countries under study. So that's not far from the 15% global estimate, or 1 billion global estimate of the World Report on Disability in 2011. Among households, we find that more than 1 in 4 households have an adult with a functional difficulty. And then we have a lot of results around inequalities by functional difficulty status in terms of educational attainment, work, health, and standard of living. So standard of living includes a variety of indicators around, for instance, having electricity or adequate living conditions. And a disability gap, which refers to a disadvantage for persons with functional difficulties compared to persons with no such difficulty, is found across countries consistently in terms of educational attainment, literacy, food insecurity, exposure to shocks, asset ownership, and health expenditures. And for a majority of countries, we also find a gap, a disability gap for the employment rate, the youth idle rate, the share of adults in informal work, living conditions, and domestic violence. So we also do a multidimensional analysis at the individual level. That means we consider if an individual has multiple deprivations, meaning perhaps they are not working, but also do not have adequate housing at the same time. And we also do a multidimensional analysis at the country level by considering the share of indicators with a disability gap within a country. And we find large and consistent inequalities by disability status. So what's next? The next report is planned for June 2022. So it will update the review of national surveys and censuses and their disability questions, and will analyze data sets for additional countries. And we look forward to the feedback from the audience today to inform our work. And overall, just wanted to highlight that the results point towards the need for more policy work to curb inequalities and realize the CRPD. But more immediately, the results also show that it is possible to disaggregate development indicators by disability status using nationally representative survey or census data. So what we need is more national data sets with questions on functional difficulties, such as the Washington Group short set. So thank you very much.
Perfect. Currently unmuted.
Thank you very much, Sophie. You have showed how the first report of the Disability Data Initiative shows that persons with disabilities continue to be invisible in many countries around the world. The stark inequalities
The host has spotlighted your video.
that are shown highlight the urgent need for policies for the rights and the well-being of persons with disabilities. Now we turn on to our Q&A session. So we will start reading the questions, and we'll give the floor to the panelists to